Last time, we asked a simple but challenging question. Whom did Jesus truly choose? Was it Peter, James, and John, as we've always been told? Or do the earliest memories of the faith reveal really another picture? One in which James, the Lord's brother, became the chosen witness of the risen Christ. See, this isn't about replacing tradition or anything like that. No, it's about recovering the earliest heartbeat of the story. In the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus takes 3 disciples up a high mountain. His face shines like the sun. His garments become dazzling white. Moses and Elijah appear beside him. And a voice from the cloud declares, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Mark chapter 9 and verse 13, 1 to 13. Also Matthew 17, 1 to 5, and Luke 9, 28 to 36, and 2 Peter 1, 16 to 21 all recount this moment. It is a sacred moment. The veil of heaven lifted for an instant, and Peter, James, and John stand as witnesses, the inner 3. But when we closely read, we find each gospel shaping the story slightly differently. See, by Matthew and Luke's time, the raw immediacy of Mark's account is sort of softened, turned into a theological reflection, so to speak. Now, could these differences reflect not confusion, but development? You see, a reshaping of memory as communities grew and expanded and sought to define who was closest to Jesus. See, John's gospel does not even include the Transfiguration. Instead, light and glory permeate the entire narrative. We have seen his glory, John 1 and verse 14 records. And additionally, John never names the disciple whom Jesus loved. Yet, this disciple appears at the Last Supper, the site of execution, and the tomb. Let's just check that. John 19 and verses 26 and 27. See, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." So from that hour, this disciple took her into his home. Now, perhaps this figure is not an outsider at all, but someone from Jesus' own family, his own household. Please think about this. Would Jesus have entrusted his mother's care to someone outside the family, especially when his brother, James the Just, was alive? See, if this beloved disciple was James, the eldest surviving brother, the faithful one, the future leader, if the beloved disciple was Jesus' brother, James the Just, then of course the act becomes familial, doesn't it? Symbolic and divinely ordained, if you wish to look at it like that. Does not even Mark call Jesus the son of Mary at Mark 6 and verse 3, really emphasizing her central role in the story? And do not Paul's own letters recognize this transition? We read in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 7, "Then he appeared to James, Now, let us dwell on that for a moment. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, written decades before the Gospels, preserves what might be the earliest account. See, at 1 Corinthians 15 and 5 through to 8, we read, "At that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 brothers at once, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me also, as to one of untimely birth." See, it's an ordered confession, not necessarily a strict chronology, as Paul himself does not write very clearly about the chronological sequence. But really what matters is who appears within that sequence. See, in that concise summary, James, he stands out. He isn't part of the wider circle of 500. He is personally named, like Peter. And that tells us something really quite profound. See, and by the time Paul writes those words, James is already recognized as the leader in Jerusalem. Galatians, the first and second chapters, Paul calls James a pillar of the church. See, to mention him in the same breath as Cephas is to acknowledge his authority. And why? Well, because according to Paul, somewhere after the crucifixion and before Pentecost, the risen Jesus appeared to his brother. And we can only imagine what passed between them. So, the one who we are informed in the gospel accounts once stood outside the door and in doubt, now stands at the heart of the movement in faith. Then, when we turn to Acts, what do we find? Well, Acts chapter 12 and verse 17, Peter tells us, he tells the believers, that is, tell these things to James and to the brothers. And again in Acts 15, James delivers the final council judgment. It is my decision. See, we find James presiding in Jerusalem, making final adjustments and being greeted by Paul himself. So, quite suddenly, from skeptic to shepherd, from brother to bishop, James, called the just, is really the steady center of the community Jesus left behind. See, every record points to James, this quiet, steadfast leader of Jerusalem. Except something really important. So, what are we missing? Well, consider this. If it was also the James who stood on the mountain at the Transfiguration and at the site of the execution of Jesus, then James is both witness and shepherd, the one chosen to carry the light forward. See, leadership in the kingdom, well, it isn't about prominence, but faithfulness and humility and trust. Jesus didn't hand his mission to the loudest voice, but to the one who quietly embodied his own spirit, James the Just. See, the light of the Transfiguration didn't vanish at Calvary. No, it passed silently, faithfully, from the first son of Mary, Jesus, to the second son of Mary, James the Just. And John's Gospel closes in a mystery. John 21 and verse 24, we read, This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who has written them down, and we know that his testimony is true. And if the writer knows these things are true, then we can also know, can't we? See, if this beloved disciple was James, the brother of Jesus, then his voice echoes still in every prayer, in every act of justice, every faithful follower of the way. Now, maybe Jesus didn't just choose a follower. He chose his own brother, the one who knew him best, to carry the light forward. Now, when I read the scriptures carefully, and this is just my personal opinion, and I hope I've done so in this presentation, but personally, my opinion, the words, they really scream off the pages toward me. See, Jesus chose his brother, the disciple whom he loved, to take care of his beloved mother, and to shepherd his flock in his absence. And as James took his place really at the center of the Jerusalem assembly, well, the other apostles gathered around him, each shaped by a different path to that point, a different calling to that point, but also, along with the others, we have Simon, known as the Zealot, carrying the fire of national hope and resistance. And then we have Jude, sometimes called Thaddeus. He speaks of mercy and endurance. Now, we will be covering these individuals in the forthcoming videos, because it's important to know these ones as best as we can. But together, they represented a spectrum of what the early movement had become. Not a hierarchy, but a fellowship bound by witness and by obedience. See, these were men who walked the same hills as Jesus, heard the same parables from Jesus, watched the same suffering of Jesus. Yet, after the resurrection, their roles began to change, not by ambition, but really by appointment. Now, in the weeks ahead, we will explore how this leadership formed, how it balanced zeal with wisdom, and how James, the brother who once stood in silence, became the voice of the movement that bore his own brother's name. So, next time, we will examine how James, his leadership, actually shaped the earliest believers, and why later traditions sort of shifted the spotlight elsewhere. So, until then, thank you, and see you next time.